So good afternoon, James. Great to see you again.
Good afternoon. Nice to speak.
Yeah, I hope you have been keeping well and busy, no doubt, since our last meeting in Lucerne in early August.
We have plenty of challenges at the moment. So yes, busy, and yes, well, thank you as well.
So I'm going to kick off this conversation with my first topic about career development. And I noticed that you were trained as an accountant with PwC and worked in investment banking for some years before moving into corporate sector as a financial management executive, and then into general management and became CEO of Mandarin Oriental in 2016. If you were to advise today's ambitious young people, what would you tell them about career development? Should it be a deliberate process or simply being at the right place at the right time and meeting the right people?
I think it's a combination of both. I should also add to your very clear synopsis that my academic training was as a geographer. So I studied geography at university and indeed continue to pursue that interest as well, which marks me apart from many who will study business at university and then do business for the rest of their lives. I'm a great believer that if at all possible, and for many people, if their parents will permit, people get a great advantage from studying something that really interests them and challenges them academically before they go into the world of business, banking, accounting, law, or whatever it may be thereafter. I also believe that in any career development, there has to be a significant element of luck. And anyone who believes they got to where they get to purely by their own skills and ability probably should take a pill or two of modesty to incorporate in that, because we all need luck in our careers. But having said that, having a perspective on one's own ability, one's own strengths, and understanding what those are, and at the same time recognizing where one has weaknesses and taking steps to try and manage those or not bring them to the fore in the career path one chooses, I also think is very important. So I began my career having been a geographer as an accountant because I knew and was confident in my mathematical ability and felt that getting a good basis in numbers and in numeracy for business would be very valuable. But I had no intention of being an accountant, if I can put it that way in inverted commas, and progressed on from that to go into banking because, again, I felt it would be a good background and training for a business career. And so that was entirely calculated, recognizing that my desire was to work in the corporate sector, and I was considering how best to get into the sector. I don't think there is a right answer to the right way of doing things, but I think it is important to play to one's strengths and to be thinking how to manage that balance between using one's own skills and that element of luck that one needs to advance one's career. And the other thing I would always advise people to do is reflect and think about their contacts, their relationships, and how to develop those most effectively so that as opportunities come their way, they're doing their best to manage, understand those, and make the right choices about job positions that they take as they progress.
Excellent, excellent. I think indeed, like many things in life, it is always a mix or a combination of various things. If I remember correctly, it was John Lennon who famously said, "Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans." So sounds like
it's rather like people often say to me now, "What's my plan for the next 10 years?" And my answer is always a very simple one. I don't have a plan. My whole philosophy in life is to keep an open mind so that when opportunities come along, I'm in a position to take them.
Excellent, indeed, very much in agreement. Traditionally, many of our graduates go into the global hospitality industry, some working for brand names such as Mandarin Oriental. Now, to be successful in this kind of business organization, what would you say are the most important ingredients, competencies or skills our students should look to acquire? What do you value the most in young talent in your business?
My answer actually to you is the same as I would have given when I was the finance director for the whole of the Jardine Group and looking to bring in finance talent. The four things that I look at most importantly when I'm considering caliber intake at whatever level is, first of all, intellect, looking for people who are bright and clearly can identify and illustrate the fact that they have a level of intelligence that is going to be valued and useful to the organization. The second is communication skills, and I mean both oral and written. I suppose I mean primarily in English, but clearly if one is specifically of a certain linguistic alternative to English, that too. But one's ability to communicate effectively to one's peers, those of the same level, to those who's working for one, and for those for whom one's working, to be able to really get across messages clearly and to be drawing and taking people with one in doing so. The third is personality, and I think it's the one that's least appreciated and most important. That actually wherever one gets to in life and whatever one achieves, a big part in one's success in doing it, in my view, is personality. And people need to use their personality as they progress and advance. And too many people think that getting first-class degrees and lots of academic qualifications is going to take them forward in life. And ultimately, the thing that will take them the furthest is their personality. And then the last that I would always put forward is an innate ability to illustrate and show leadership, whether it's, again, leadership of those working for one as a boss, or whether it's leadership in a room of people of the same level to take an issue forward in an agenda. And I think characteristics of leadership are key. So those are the four, and I suppose I would highlight the obvious in that is none of them are technical requirements or specific educational learnings, but rather the qualities of the individual themselves.
Excellent. Well, you must have had an advanced copy of my interview transcript, because my next topic is indeed about leadership. And arguably the most relevant in today's world is leadership in a crisis environment, like the global pandemic we all face together. So in my recent engagements with our students, they asked me what my top learnings are in managing SEG in this global pandemic environment. And I think it's an excellent question. And I'm sure they would like to know what your answer is to that, managing Mandarin Oriental in such an environment.
My principal learning, I think it would be fair to say, has been a further revelation of the extraordinary passion and commitment that I've found my colleagues within the group, and indeed many colleagues in other groups within the hospitality industry, have to their career and to their guests and fellow colleagues. The passion and the empathy that I found people have had within the group has been ahead of anything I would certainly have foreseen in other businesses and lines of work that I've experienced during my career. So that has been a further enlightenment of something I realized when I joined Mandarin Oriental, how deep that feeling of passion was. But in terms of then how to handle the crisis, I think it's been an interesting learning of recognizing that one doesn't get decisions right often in a crisis, but often it's for the right reasons. If one had known at the beginning of the pandemic that it was going to continue as long as it has and had these recurring waves in the way we have, one might well have taken some very different decisions 9-10 months ago in terms of how one managed the cost base and structure of the organization. But the reality is that the decisions one takes along the way are reflective of the knowledge one has at the time, and one hopes are well taken decisions at that point. So the biggest learning for me is to constantly focus on looking forward and the decisions one has to take today about the future, and not look back at the decisions one took 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months ago and reflect on whether or not they were the right ones, because one's got to be constantly reconsidering the position today, not reconsidering the position 6 months or 9 months ago. And I think one of the most important things from my point of view has been, in an organization like ours, the key asset is our people. They are the most valuable asset we have. And it's absolutely crucial through a situation such as this pandemic that we are very focused on the morale of our colleagues and people, and ensure that whatever the circumstances, however difficult they are, one is appreciative of the individual circumstances that colleagues all around the globe are facing, and thinking about it from their perspective, and not simply from a corporate central perspective of how do I cut costs, how do I reduce this? Because if one does that, then the morale and strength of the organization gets severely damaged.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. I think indeed, looking forward with a positive mindset is extremely important, and focusing on the fundamental of any organization, namely our people, is definitely the right strategy for leadership in any situation, especially in a crisis situation. So thank you for that. I remember when we met, you mentioned the value of a service mindset. Your exact words were something like, to be of service is a privilege. Is that also from a leadership standpoint, or more broadly? Would you care to elaborate that for our students?
Well, I think it's an interesting cultural point that varies across different nations around the world in terms of people's perspective on service. Some do view service somehow and associate it with subservience or secondary position of a servile position, whereas others regard it as a privilege. And that cultural element, I think, is very important if one's to come in to the hospitality industry, that one does view service as a privilege and as something that one is fortunate to be in a position to be providing and is striving to do to the very best of one's ability. And I think I wouldn't use quite the same words, but from a leadership perspective, I think it's very important to recognize that it's a privilege to be leading, and that in doing so, one needs to recognize the duty one has to one's colleagues and those that one is leading, to look after them, to have their interests and their long-term worth in mind, as well as that of the organization. So a leadership position is one of responsibility, and the principal responsibility of a leader is to the colleagues. And in that context, that is a position of service and should be seen as such.
Excellent. My third topic is about outlook for the global hospitality sector. Swiss Education Group is the largest private hospitality and business education group in Switzerland. And we work very closely with leading industry players. I personally see the trend of development of global hospitality continuing worldwide, and the need for well-educated, trained professionals remaining very strong, and many opportunities for entrepreneurs in that space as well. But with the pandemic, some parents and students may be very concerned about the value of such education or prospects of employment in this industry. How do you see that?
I think it would be difficult to challenge the assertion that hospitality has a very strong long-term growth projection across the world. I think what it would be possible to discuss and question is segments of hospitality and which ones will do well and which may do less well. There have undoubtedly been seismic consequences from the pandemic, and many hospitality companies are struggling very severely at the moment. But the particularly difficult struggle, I think, is those that have assets in the hospitality segment that are not yielding a return on the value of the asset at the moment. And the question is, are those assets appropriately targeted at the right sectors that are likely to continue to grow? I think, and I can speak primarily for the luxury sector, we are going to continue to see very strong long-term growth in the luxury leisure industry going forward. And I think leisure is the key element in the luxury hospitality sector. Business is clearly taken a knock, and I think the very fact of discussions like this one from a virtual point of view and the way conferences and other things have been organized over the last 9 months is going to mean that is going to be slower to recover. And I think probably the long-term relative decline of it as a proportion of the whole, which was already taking place and we had identified as a trend, will have been accelerated somewhat. I also think that the way in which people do business and handle business will change quite significantly as a result of the pandemic. But it's not going to change the underlying need that people feel to travel, to experience leisure and thereby hospitality, whether in a quasi-work leisure orientation or a full leisure basis. And indeed, as the world increasingly employs AI in various means, the proportion of people that move into the tertiary service sector and away from production is likely to increase, and it's going to mean more people are going to need to be employed in the hospitality sector, in my view. And I think that means that those are well qualified, well trained, and have the right characteristics for doing so will be very valuable. But I also think it goes further than that, because the skills one learns in a hospitality training are ones that are just as relevant in an investment bank or in a chemical company in terms of how one operates and engages with colleagues and works with them in terms of working and delivering together in the various functions that are there. And I think the skills that one can learn through a hospitality training are valuable in terms of the underlying work tasks that people may do going forward. And so it shouldn't simply be seen as a learning to be able to go in and operate hotels or hospitality, but more broadly, how to provide and facilitate hospitality in the broader work environment.
Well, your words are music to my ears, and these are very much the same philosophy, same sentiments that we are executing throughout our curriculum at the various schools under Swiss Education Group. So
I think the thing that goes with that, though, that is worth mentioning is that what is important is that it's not the traditional style of hospitality that once was employed. And so those skills need to be brought in, but as you're adopting to, with a more contemporary style. And in particular, the most significant thing that needs adjusting for people who've gone through traditional hospitality education is the reduction of the amounts of hierarchy that operate and the tendency for a formality in the structure and their manner to be able to employ a more engaging and empathetic style as they use it in the workplace. And that's something I think one's beginning to see coming through, but will be very important, I think, in the years to come.
Yes, indeed. I remember, the other thing I remember very well from our conversation last time was this notion of luxury leisure, which you talked about briefly just now. It is more about leisure, and it is a different kind of leisure, less formality. We've both nowhere lost a tie today. So I think that's progress, right? Last time when I met you, I was properly tied and suited. But I think indeed in this environment, yeah, people are looking for comfort. But not
and if I can be so impolite to say so in a sense, the very fact that you say properly attired is one of those mindsets that I think we need to get beyond. That I know there are certain cultures where it still is properly attired, but I think in most that time has passed and times are moving fairly rapidly in that respect.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, James, it's been a tremendous pleasure seeing you again. And thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and experiences. I look forward to welcoming you to visit at least one of our picturesque campuses in Switzerland. I think we at least can hopefully see you again in Lucerne. And I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
I shall look forward to that very much indeed. And thank you very much for the chance to chat with you.
Thank you, James.